I want everyone to know I take no pleasure in what I'm about to do here. I'm not happy about this at all. I don't want to do videos like this. I don't enjoy it. But sometimes you have to fight fire with fire. If they're going to come after you, just like a nation would defend themselves, you have to defend yourself. And I'm really saddened by a lot of this because I once called Derrick a friend. And I regret that now. It's obvious he was never a friend. He was just waiting and looking for things to use against me. And that'll be evidently clear tonight. You might be wondering why I can say that they're lying. And I know they're probably thinking, well, he's going to say we're lying about the text of Dionysus. No, we're going to come to different conclusions on that, but that doesn't mean they're lying. What they're lying about is what they said about me. They might be thinking, oh, they're going to skip over all that stuff about his conversation with Josh because we really got him there. Oh, my sweet summer child. That's the main event tonight. That's where you really messed up. You should have kept this dispute between us just on the facts and the disagreements of interpretations here, but you had to make it personal, didn't you? So Derrick turned out to be someone that he just, I wasn't the person I thought he was, unfortunately. And that just makes me sad because I don't want to do this, but unfortunately I have to. But we're going to get into a lot of things tonight. I will show a clip from my last live stream on Aquiles Tatius where I did correct myself, but Derrick didn't play that part. I will also get into some other issues, but what basically happened is I gave a presentation to lay people at a church on mythicists, not Derrick, not Neil, Gnostic informant, but mythicists, people who say Jesus is a myth and was just copied from pagan legends. Okay, neither of them believe that, so I have no clue why they were so triggered by it. Okay, it was never about them or their views. This was a presentation for lay people, a lot of people who have never heard this stuff before, how to combat it at a lay level. They have taken this entire thing wildly out of context, and in their attempt to respond to me, they have made so many blatant errors. So we're going to get into all that tonight. I'm going to go over facts about Dionysus, Inanna. We're going to get to Baal because I can't wait to talk about Mark Smith as well. A lot of issues. So they did a stream about me 2 days ago called Inspiring Philosophy Gets Exposed. And really, it's them demonstrating very poor research on their part. And not just with the whole Dionysus stuff, but how they tried to research me. That's where I'll be able to demonstrate they lied and their poor research. Thank you for the super chat. Hey, IP streaming at a Euro-friendly time at last. Yeah, I try to. I'll try to do more in the future, but the later night ones just get more views here. I guess it's just I have a bigger US audience, so that's just the way it is. Did Keener get back to you on the date of gospel to 80? No. I don't think I even have a time to email him yet. I wanted to see if I can find in his writings first, and I just haven't gotten around to it. Been a little distracted lately, as you can tell. There's been some other things going on. So I'm going to get right into it. So they're claiming that I was wrong about the Feast of Epiphany. That's on January 6th, celebrating when the wise men came to Jesus. They're claiming that's in the 2nd century. Now, I'm going to go through and respond to a lot of the stuff in here. Obviously not going to play it all, but they're going to try to show that the Feast of Epiphany is earlier, that it actually dates to Clement of Alexandria, so 2nd century. So let's just play some of this, and then I will stop and respond here. So a lot to go over. We're going to go slow tonight. I have a lot of quotes here on the Feast of Epiphany, though.
We need to help Michael Jones out. He's asking for help.
He said, what am I missing here? Help me out here. Well, number one, you're wrong about when they decided on January 6th.
Bingo.
He said it like 3 times in that clip. This is way centuries later. He said post-Constantine. Then he said 4th century towards the end of the clip. Wrong.
Right.
Clement of Alexandria is the first person on any record at all to mention a date specific to the birth of Christ. And he also mentions that they celebrate the baptism too on the night prior in readings, which is January 5th. Who is he talking about, Clement of Alexandria? He's going back talking about Basilides.
Basilides.
A Christian Gnostic who lived.
So he's saying Basilides celebrated the baptism and the birth of Jesus on January 6th. Remember that. Remember that.
At the end of the first, early second century,
He was teaching, just so people
prominent
know,
teacher.
from 117 to 138 AD. And just to emphasize this point about what you're saying, to kind of vouch for myself here, I said this and quoted Clement in the video that he is reacting to, and only chose certain things to react to. Listen, I don't expect him to respond to everything I put, but the fact that he accuses me later of reading comprehension skills not being applicable to how I'm reading these ancient sources, which
I said that I was going to employ reading comprehension skills. I didn't. That doesn't prove the negative.
Jimmy are going to go over the most important ones that deal with this water into wine.
Yeah,
is pretty interesting. He's not listening to his own Christian fathers.
Yeah, and January 6th came before December 25th, which is the 3rd century when they calculated that. January 6th is the first time they celebrated anything, and they still to this day celebrated by Armenian and Eastern Orthodox Church. However, Basilides,
I was just about to ask you
the central gospel to the Basilidians is John's gospel.
Okay, I want to just jump ahead really fast, and we're going to come back to another part where they say this just explicitly again, just so we make sure we're getting more context here. So I believe it's at 54 is where I want to go here. So let's go to exactly 54 minutes.
So it's before midnight of January 6th when you start this.
Well, what does Clement say? He says they stayed up all night reading scripture on January the 5th.
And celebrating his
the birth
baptism
and
too.
the baptism. The birth of Christ and baptism.
Yeah.
So
you've heard it. Clement says Basilides celebrated the birth and baptism of Jesus. But that's not what Clement says. And also, this is not the Feast of the Epiphany. Derrick, in your video, you said Feast of Epiphany, okay? Feast of Epiphany is the Christian feast that came out in the 4th century. The first reference to that actually comes from Ammianus Marcellinus, writing around like, I think, 360 or so. He's the first one that specifically mentioned the Feast of the Epiphany, which focuses on the wise men, because that's when it's announced. And then it also includes the baptism and the wedding at Cana. Basilides is only celebrating the baptism, and he's not of the Christian Orthodoxy. He's a different sect. So let me put up some slides here. Oh, actually, first, I'm going to put up Clement, and we're going to go through it. I think that's fair. So, oh, get out of here. Okay, so here it is. I believe it's down in 22. Actually, it's just easier for me to do this. That way I can just find it quicker instead of trying to get it. So here it is. This is the saying here. So, no, I want to say here. So, and the followers of Basilides hold the day of his baptism as a festival, spending the night before in readings. Doesn't say birth. Where does the birth come from? Okay, it's actually above it, and he's talking about someone else here. So here's where the birth comes from. So he says he's talking about a court. He's calculating things. And then he says here, so and from that time he suffered till the destruction of Jerusalem, 42 years and 3 months, and from the destruction of Jerusalem to the death of Commodus, 128 years, 10 months, and 3 days. Now, this is where the date comes from. This is Clement's own calculation. Notice he's not talking about the Basilidians. Okay, this is his calculation. Now, if you read Thomas J. Taylor, he says some have calculated this to be in November. You did, and we will get to that. But I'm going to start ignoring your comments now because I need to focus on what I'm doing here. And I'm not you don't realize how bad it was. Okay, so let's get back into this here. So this is Clement's own calculation. Now, Thomas Taylor does argue he's calculating it to January 6th. But I want you to remember, because I'm going to come back to this point, he's calculating it. He's not relying on Dionysus cult worship. He's doing his own calculations. The same thing I said in the stream last time. This is what Christians were doing when they were coming up with important days. After this, he goes on. He says, from the birth of... Oh, sorry. Here's the calculation that everyone cites. Sorry, this is a prior calculation. Taylor notes these calculations are inconsistent if it works out to November. If you use a different calendar, this is the calculation here that would arrive at the birth of Jesus being January 6th. But then he says right after this, and there are those who have determined not only the year of the Lord's birth, but also the day. And they say that it took place in the 28th year of Augustus and in the 25th day of Passion. Now that's, I believe, late May, early June. Then he says, and the followers of Basilides hold the day of his baptism as a festival. So look, holding the day as a baptism. Then he goes on to say others disagree. And they say that in the 15th year of Tiberius Caesar, the second month, that was 11th day of the month. So they date it to January 6th, roughly. And treating his passion with very great accuracy, some say it took place in the 16th year of Tiberius on the 25th of that month. And others, the 25th of another month. Others say it's the 19th. The Savior suffered. So others say that he was born on the 24th or the 25th of this month. I'm not going to even try to pronounce it. But you get the idea. He's citing various traditions. Of the Basilidians, he only says they were celebrating the baptism. Now, that's not the Christian Feast of Epiphany. And to just make sure I wasn't going crazy, I went and looked at what Thomas Taylor says. For the Basilidians, of course, the content of the festival is not the birth, but the baptism. And many understood the 2 days to be identical on the basis of Luke 3:23, taking the text to mean that Jesus was baptized on his 30th birthday. However, since that is far from explicit in the text, it is probably safe to conjecture that this interpretation represents an attempt to unify divergent traditions. So Clement doesn't say they celebrated the birth, they celebrated the baptism. Now, you guys tried to make the claim that this is actually coming from Dionysus worship. But if you go back to what Clement said, notice he doesn't bring that up. He's doing his own calculations. That's why he arrives at that date. Again, a lot of times Christians came up with their dates because of calculations, regardless of what pagans were doing those days. A lot of times, that's what they were doing. Sometimes, some of their dates came close to pagan festivals. They didn't care. There were so many pagan festivals in different regions at different times. They just can't account for all of them. But let me just go what Thomas Taylor says. Now, this is a long, extended quote, but I think he says it the best. So I'm going to let him say it. I think that's the best way to do it, about if there's Dionysian influence. He says, Pliny was familiar with several instances in which water takes the flavor of wine, or wine is miraculously produced, but he does not, with one exception, associate these phenomena with any particular days of the year. I'm going to butcher these names. I apologize. It's just, I'm really bad at pronouncing names. That exception in his reference is to the testimony of Pausanias, 3 times consul, that the water flowing from the spring in the temple of Pater Liber on the island of Andros always has the flavor of wine on the nones of January. That date, January 5th. So the date of that is January 5th. That's important. Okay. Is not identified by Pliny as a particular festival, but the miraculous flow of wine is called Dios Theodosia. So notice, Pliny doesn't say a festival, the divine gift of Zeus. Both Bott and MacArthur sought to bring that text into relation to a separate testimony of Pausanias a century later regarding an undated festival called the Thea, celebrated at Elea in honor of Dionysus. Now, what a lot of people do, and I'm gonna come back to this quote in a minute, but I want to show you something else. I want to go to Pliny directly here because I think that's important. What are they talking about here? So he's bringing up 2 authors. I'm just going to look at Pliny just so you're aware. Let me just pull up my screen here. So Pliny says in Natural Histories, sorry, let me go. So this is one of the things he says. There is a fountain. So notice it says fountain at Andros consecrated to Father Liber, from which wine flows during the 7-day appointed for the yearly festival of that god. Now, it doesn't tell you when. It just says there's a yearly festival. Elsewhere in Pliny, though, he says this. It says, in the island of Andros, at the temple of Father Bacchus, we are assured by Pausanias, who was thrice consul, that there is a spring which on the nones, that's the 5th of January, always has the flavor of wine. Now, what Taylor is saying is these are 2 different things. These are 2 different things. So let's go back to Taylor and let's continue with the quote. That's what he's making the argument. Okay, so this is the quote you can see from Pliny here. I don't think I need to read that. If you want to pause and read, go for it. Here, the Andrian phenomenon is identified as the festival of Dionysus, the Pater Liber, to whom the temple of Pliny's description is dedicated. There is, however, no indication that the Thea occurred on the same day as the Andrian feast of Dionysus. Therefore, we may ponder about MacArthur's assurance that the discrepancy between the nones of January and the date of the Epiphany need not concern us. He urged that the difference constitutes no problem because what was involved at Andros was a nocturnal festival through the night from the 5th to the 6th, a datum supplied by neither Pliny nor Pausanias. The festival at Elea was pre-nocturnal, but we are not told which night in the year that was. Indeed, it is impossible to establish even the season of the year in which the Thea was celebrated. Some asserting that it was in the spring, others in winter. Its identification with the festival at Andros is by no means established, and the descriptions of the two are quite different. We cannot postulate for the classical world but one single festival of Dionysus kept everywhere on the same date. Okay, we can't, as many writers have thought to do. Indeed, at Athens, a principal seat of the cult of Dionysus, his festivals occurred in each of 4 months, beginning in December, with the major Dionysia in March. The texts we have examined give us secure data only for a miraculous flow of wine in the temple of Pater Liber on Andros on a festival of Dionysus on January 5th. Pausanias adding that the miracle occurred on every second year. This is hardly a secure basis in pagan religion for a festival of the birth and baptism of Christ on January 6th. The similarities between the phenomenon cited by Epiphanius for Sabria and Gerasa, and several examples mentioned by Pliny and others of instances in which a source of water yields wine instead suggests that this was a far from uncommon phenomenon. But I think that's how you say that, suggests that it may in fact have amounted simply to a generous and plainly human provision of wine for a festivity through a source normally associated with water, not unlike the fountains of sparkling wine that are frequently encountered at wedding festivals today. That these reminded Epiphanius of Christ's miracle at the Cana wedding feast is a tribute to his piety. However, since the phenomenon cited by Pliny and other classical authors are not encountered, just no January 6th or even January 5th, there seems to be no reason to leap from such a generous flowing of wine, last part of the quote, to utterly unsupported hypothesis of a universally observed festival of Dionysus on January 6th as a pre-Christian foundation for the feast of the Epiphany. When all is said and done, from all the evidence we have considered for a pagan background to the Epiphany, nothing points definitively to a widespread festival on January 6th, even if we accept Epiphanius' account of the Ion festival. We are left with severe problems. That festival seems to be distinguished from disquietingly similar observances on December 25th because the Ion feast is the distinctive local observance of the guardian of Alexandria, and thus not a widespread observance. If we do not accept Epiphanius' description of that rite as pre-nocturnal, then Macella's testimony to the Ion festival is ambiguous, since he gives as the date of the feast not January 6th, but January 5th. Egyptian data will show that the feast of the Epiphany at Alexandria was focused on Christ's baptism, the miracle at Cana being celebrated later in the same month at the time of Epiphanius' writing. That first miracle in which Jesus manifested his glory is an important theme in the Epiphany festival, but the singular role assigned to it by Epiphanius must not be supposed to be the general in the church in his time. His unique dating for the baptism thrust on the Cana miracle, you get the point. Okay. So there's a lot of problems with sort of saying that there is this pagan background behind the Feast of Epiphany. And as I said, if you read Clement in context, he doesn't say it's because of Dionysus that he has put the birth on that day. Different than what the Basilidians are doing. What he is saying is he's done his own calculations, and this is what he has arrived at. And also, the Basilidians is not the same. Now, why did they pick that date? I have a simpler explanation that can be used to explain that within Christian tradition without appealing to anything outside of it. Now, this is an older source, but I think he's right here because he cites some good evidence. He says the heretical festival of Epiphany, he puts it in quotations, became the universal festival throughout the whole Christian world, commemorating both the baptism and the nativity of Jesus. Now he says this: it is hard to explain this as a worldwide imitation of the Basilidians. It is quite easy to explain it if the lecture arrangement of Mark was used as a calendar fairly widely at one time. He also says in the secondary arrangement of Mark, which is found in the non-B manuscripts, the Roman year was followed. The arrangement would be the most natural way of explaining the origin of January 6th as the festival of the baptism of Jesus. Why did they place the baptism of Jesus on January 6th? Is because if you're reading, if you're following this calendar they have, where you start reading Mark on the new year, you're going to arrive at the baptism of Jesus. You're going to arrive at the baptism of Jesus on this by January 6th. So their own liturgical formulas get you there. Now, again, what we actually have here, though, is the Basilidians celebrating their own baptism festival, and then later Christians doing it. Derrick, in your video around 137, you brought up the Christian feast of Epiphany. I said it was 4th century. That's true. If you would have said that various sects were celebrating the baptism earlier, okay, yeah, that's true too. But you need to look at what we're pointing at here. You're trying to say the feast of the Epiphany came from Dionysus, And it's just far more likely that the Basilidians were doing their own thing. The Christians later were doing their own thing. They were just following this calendar issue than appealing to something within, or appealing to something outside of Christianity to explain why they picked this date. That's a far simpler explanation and explains all the data. And also, eves of holidays are always important in Christian tradition. This is why we celebrate on Maundy Thursday, as well as meet Saturday night before Easter. All Hallows Eve was important in the history as well. Christmas Eve. So these are all important. Them reading before, I don't think is a big deal either. So again, now, if there is any sort of connection to the Dionysus cult, I would say it's a better explanation as cultic competition instead of direct mimicking. Like, I've argued for cultic competition in a lot of other videos. If there is a connection there, then maybe they did sort of some arrangement to sort of get it there, which is possible. I just think we can simply explain the data from their own calculations and what their own liturgical readings. So I think that's important there. All right, let me go to the next section here of their video because I want to talk more about this, and then we're going to start getting into ways they've lied about things I said here. So let me make sure I'm at the right time point. Yeah, this is about it. So let's go to that.
Screen right now I'm showing. This was 8 months ago. Somebody sent me, somebody. So
just remember, this was 8 months ago. It'll be roughly March when this was recorded. That's going to be important later because timing is important.
One of my friends sent me a link. I go, what is this? I click on it. It's Michael Jones in front of some sort of convention doing a speech that he prepared on mythicism. And I'm not a mythicist, and I've made videos against mythicism.
Then why did you care? Like, this is what I don't get. Why did you care so much? None of this was addressing you. This was a presentation for lay people about how to deal with people who claim copying. Neither of you claim that. I don't know why you were so triggered.
But the level of fallacies in here, the straw man arguments that he was putting forth.
Conflating people who, this is not in any way a serious scholarly take. So the fact,
Derrick, I'm not presenting a paper for a journal. I'm presenting the people in church who may have never even heard some of this stuff before. Right. It's not a deep scholarly take or serious, as you said. It's something I'm trying to water things down to make it more palatable for lay people. Like, are you like, duh?
That if you and me said, again, we're going to get into this, I'm sure, as we play it, but like all Bible believers are flat earthers and young earth creationists.
Right.
I know Michael would feel offended by that.
Right.
Why is it that zeitgeist versions of mythicism then equates, you can't find pagan parallels. Exactly right. You can't do any of this. Actual scholars do this.
Yeah, I never said that. I said, if you're going to claim copying to argue Jesus is a myth, there's a lot of steps you got to do to get that, because that's a pretty bold claim. That's different than saying there's similar cultural background. If someone wants to claim copying, that's a far bigger claim. So you're taking what I said out of context here. Let me jump ahead a little bit more here.
First, we need to show correlations between Jesus and pagan gods.
So they're citing me, and that this is my list on how you can show that Jesus is copied off of a pagan legend.
They need to show they are not just hasty generalizations. You just can't be like, Horus did miracles and Jesus did miracles, therefore they're the same. That's not how it works. They need to show that correlations predate Christianity. So sometimes they'll bring up Dionysius and they'll say Dionysius turned water into wine. Yeah, that comes from a 3rd century text. Postdates the New Testament. Shut up.
I love that this is what they're so offended about. Like, it just sort of pushes that. Like, it's obviously a joke. That's why the audience laughs. But, like, this just sort of pushes that stereotype that secularists, atheists, people on the left can take a joke and they're offended by everything. I mean, like it obviously was meant to be tongue-in-cheek. I have no idea why they were so offended by that.
Then they need to show a causal link between the New Testament and pagan literature. Okay, because correlation is not causation. You actually have to show that the things are not just similar, there's a causal link. So does the New Testament quote a pagan text to make a connection? And then they need to show Jesus didn't exist. Because even if they were successful in 1 through 4, it still would not get to 5. And I'll prove that to you at the end of this.
This is completely arbitrary nonsense. These 5 steps that mythicists need to do is complete nonsense.
Right.
No, it isn't. It's not nonsense if they want to claim copying.
We're talking about the culture, the cultural milieu and cultures influencing other cultures and cultures, or responding to other cultures, polemicizing other cultures. That is how culture works.
Yeah.
There is no vacuum culture anywhere. So what he's doing is he's making this list of 5 things. He's setting up his own parameters and his own rules.
These are my rules, so my castle doesn't fall.
And the 5th one is especially fallacious because you can still have a real person in history being influenced by a mythology or vice versa.
Yeah.
As we see with the life of Augustus and Alexander.
That's literally the point I made at the end of the presentation. Why would you say that? Why would you bring this up as if you're addressing me, Neil? That doesn't make sense. That's the point I was making. Okay. And you're talking about Christianity not evolving in a vacuum. There's cultural influence. Where did I deny that? Again, we're talking about mythicists who claim copying to argue myth. That's all Jesus is. He's just this copy of these various things. And then you go, yeah, there's cultural influence. Christianity didn't evolve in a vacuum. Yeah, I know. That by me addressing the copying issue, I'm not denying what you're arguing. Do you see how much they're straw manning me here? And it gets worse. I'm going to jump ahead because I want to show you how they make where the lies start to happen here. So let's jump ahead here.
Oh, and that is something we're going to have to get into. And scholars who recognize this have noted it.
Now, he does mention Dionysus not turning water into wine until the 3rd century. You commented on this. He tried to correct himself and say, I was wrong about the date. But
no, he didn't correct the date.
Hold on. I accidentally paused it. I want to make sure we get that in context here.
He didn't correct the date. He didn't correct the date. So watch this. I
didn't correct the date, Derrick. Are you sure about that? Are you sure about that? Neil was right. I did. I'm going to show you here in a minute. But notice the way Neil acts, because he's got such an axe to grind and how he hates us Christians. The moment you say, no, he didn't correct the date, he just tosses his intuition out. And, oh, yeah, this is more dirt on Jones. We can use it. So I'll go with what you said, because that's what you guys say through the rest of the thing. Derrick is in the chat. What up, Derrick? You said shut up first, guys. All right. So there you can see Derrick in the chat. I want to show that. Now, I'm going to go and I'm going to play a part of my video the last time. Okay. Okay. Now, no, this is at 15 minutes in. Notice Derrick is in the chat. Y'all can see him there. He was watching. Here's what I say. The only mistake I will say I made in that is I said that Dionysus turning water into wine comes from a 3rd century text. It's actually a 3rd century manuscript, but the text, I believe, is 2nd century. Oh, Derrick, it looks like I did correct myself. But you said I didn't. And you're there in the chat watching me. And after this, you put a super chat in, but you said I didn't correct myself. And this is what you broadcasted to your audience. And then you went on your channel yesterday to do a live stream to then reiterate the points. So now there's 2 videos of you spreading misinformation about me and lying about what I said. And, you talk about my followers being sheep, but I don't see anyone in your audience correcting you on this. Why is it that I have to do it? Maybe they did. There was a lot of comments I missed. I didn't read them, like all of them. I just briefly looked. But so, yeah, I did correct myself because when I was on stage, I just misspoke. And then when I went back to look, I was like, looked at the wrong thing. So, yeah. Thank you, Matt. The receipts. Oh, and you wait till we get to the conversation with Bowen. I got receipts there. Oh, do I have receipts there? You're going to get to see that whole conversation Bowen and I had. You're going to get to see it all. So I did correct myself. Derrick is lying about me. And what am I supposed to think here? That you just missed that when you were watching live? Why did you lie? It's either, what am I supposed to conclude from this? That you missed it? I don't know what to say here. I'm very confused as to how you were exposing me by lying about what I said. Let's move on ahead. I want to get to some other aspects here. I'm going to jump ahead to a little further. We're going to start talking about the Dionysus water into wine stuff because there's a lot of stuff there I want to cover. So I believe the next I have is 48:15.
Reading comprehension is not there. Let's go.
Persons who drink the water of Lake Clitorius take a distaste for wine, meaning when they drink this, it makes them not want to drink wine. This water makes them not like wine. Okay. And Theopompus, which is in that 3rd century source, we lost his original
4th
material.
century source.
I thought it was 3rd. Athenaeus.
Oh, no. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm saying Theopompus is 4th century BC.
BC. Yeah. I'm just making the point that a 3rd century.
It's a fragment. Most of our
we're
texts are
just being
fragments.
technically correct. So he asserts that the waters of the springs already named are productive of inebriety, that people who drink those waters get drunk. They cause them to be intoxicated. Okay.
And before anyone says anything about this being a fragment that we found in a later source, it's the same exact story that Aristotle tells us.
Bingo.
So there's the idea that they changed it later to copy Christians. You're out of your damn mind. Because Michael Jones would try something like that.
He does a lot of this kind of
He
stuff.
would go, Theopompus, we lost the original. How do you know they didn't change it to copy Christians?
Right.
So with the Xenavesta, here's what's kind of going on here. I didn't say that stuff. I did not say that because the Xenavesta dates to this time, or a manuscript dates to that time, therefore that's when it goes to. Boomer Mike. That's funny. Yeah. What I said was that I cited scholars like Jenny Rose in my video, Jesus versus Zoroaster. I cited scholars like Michael Berger in my video, Jesus versus Zoroaster. And I said, look, they're the ones saying that this text postdates Christianity and that it evolved over time to compete with the rise of Muslims and Christians. So that's kind of a straw man from Neil. I didn't just say, oh, the manuscript states this time, therefore that's the date of all the traditions. I'm going off scholars who said that stuff on that stuff. So yeah, that's with the Xenavesta thing. So yeah, that is the weirdest thing I think I've ever seen. Let me see if I can switch my mic back now to the other one. And let me know if you guys have no idea. I unplugged it and plugged it back in. So let me see if, okay, it looks like it's back now. Okay, that was really weird technical errors there. So let me back up a little bit here. I'm going to play this clip because I want to make sure we get this in yeah, I backed it up to where it needs to be. So yeah, freaking weird technical issues.
Get brought up here. There is a fountain at Andros consecrated to Father Liber, Dionysus, from which wine flows during the 7 days appointed for the yearly festival of that god. So here's at the fountain at Andros, there's a water fountain, a natural fountain. They didn't have modern machinery fountains like we do. This is a natural from the earth. Water flows from a fountain at Andros.
Literally water.
Literally water.
There's nothing else you can say. You can't say it's honey. You can't say it's nothing.
It's water.
You can't say it's air. It's
for
water
7 days
that changes into wine.
Right.
There's no philosophical argument that you can make to change
no ancient would have ever done his Aristotelian nonsense.
Unless you took the wine, unless you started
Aristotelian nonsense. Okay.
Like some sort of flow of wine somehow.
Right.
And the water, there's a different water flow and there's a different water. And then you somehow took the water and put it away and then changed it with the wine. That's the only way you can get out of this.
So I want to finish this source just for the viewers.
Okay. So let me pull up the text again here so we can see this text. Because again, I want to go back to what the text says. I believe it's this one here with Pliny. Okay, there we go. Yeah. What is that here? Hold on. On the positive side, you got a lot of super chats trying to tell you mute was mighty. Yeah, and I kept hitting unmute, and then it would just not unmute, and then it would just wait like 20 seconds and say mute it. So yeah, and then I plugged it back in. So that was just a weird technical issue. That's never happened before. I will cut that out in the long for later for people watching later. But yeah, I don't know why that did that. Okay, so here's my point about this text. I want to reiterate. What does the text say? It says, the fountain of Andros consecrated to Father Liber, from which wine flows during the 7-day appointed festival of the yearly festival of that god, the taste of which becomes like that of water. Okay, my point about this is going on what the text actually says. Okay, it never says water is turning into wine. Derrick, in your video yesterday, your live stream yesterday, you said this. You said at 2:37 and 30 seconds in, you said, is it possible that in Jesus' case, he's pulling a magic trick and no wine really transformed? I'm not trying to attempt to rationalize and explain the way the miracle, when I think it's just a story, but that you're trying to rationalize this here. That's what's weird. Did I hit the wrong button again? Yeah, there we go. You're trying to rationalize this and say, well, no, it has to be water turning into wine. Whereas I'm going on what the story says. Okay. It says that there is a fountain that starts shooting out wine. That's my point. It's not saying the water turned into wine there. It's saying it shoots out wine. How are you not trying to rationalize this to make it say what you want it to say. It doesn't say transformed, and it doesn't say at any point there's a transformation happening. And I use the faucet analogy, which we'll get to in a little bit. That listen, unless they were at the fountain and they had cups under water, wine, and unless that water in the cups also changed, that wouldn't be a transformation miracle. Fountains have sources. And what I'm actually thinking of, I'm thinking of the Bacchae, when one maenad strikes the ground and out comes water, one strikes and out comes wine. Dionysus is this god doing this miracle. He could just change the source going into the fountain from the ground, as some fountains do have a source from the ground. So if they already think that Dionysus has that power to shoot wine up out of the ground, or at least Dionysus followers elsewhere did, why couldn't they think that's what's going on here? What I'm saying here is that you're reading too much into this. Could some people have read this and interpreted it as water being turned into wine? Sure. But again, go back to my original presentation, if you're going to claim Christians copying this, this is not a copy. It's completely different. That's the problem. And there are equally good interpretations for this that just look at what the text says and just says the fountain is now shooting out wine instead of water. Not that the water in the fountain was transformed. So yeah, that's the problem there. And again, the issue goes back to how it was being used in the presentation, which you're again taking out of context. The issue is, I was arguing if someone wants to claim copying, this is no indication that any Christian was reading this or knew about this and wanted to copy it. And you don't even argue that. So why are you so mad about this? It doesn't make any sense there. So that's important to keep in mind. Let me keep playing a little bit more of the video here so we can keep going.
Keep so we're on the same page. I just had to emphasize it flows water 365 minus 7 days, right?
Yeah.
7 days during the yearly festival of that god where his presence is,
which is this January 5th.
This is the point.
Which is on the night of January 5th.
January 5th. The very night
no one's is out the night of. Yeah. The same night that Basilides starts doing readings of the baptism of Christ.
Right.
And celebrates the birth on the next day, January 6th. The same thing they're doing here.
Same thing.
So we have more than a causal link here.
We have very clear, and Bultmann actually echoed the same exact thing. Okay.
So we don't have a causal link because we have equally good explanations, and Basilides isn't bringing up the wine miracle from Cana at this point. So you gotta look at that in context. You're making the logical leap here that's just not there.
So he says that God's presence there for 7 days, wine flows. So water, now you have wine flow. We have
for anyone who doesn't know, the wedding at Cana, and we pointed this out, is commemorated on January 6th in the earliest sources in Eastern Orthodox Church. The wedding at Cana is a wine miracle.
Yes.
And here we have a wine miracle for Dionysus on his Epiphany date. The same day.
Got it. So it says that the taste of that wine becomes like that of water the moment it is taken out of the site of the temple. Okay. What Jones does, and we're going to notice that you'll see this later when he tries to go, he just needs some philosophy help. Let me bring up Aristotelian philosophy.
That was jargon. That was sophistry jargon. Go ahead.
So bringing up Aristotelian categories is sophistry jargon. Philosophers, do you think studying Aristotle is sophistry and jargon? I'm just curious if you think that's what that is. And I thought you guys, Mimesis guys, were all about how cultures don't evolve in vacuums. Aristotle didn't have any influence on the Greco-Roman world. Like, really? Like, the way that he thinks was not influential in the way people in the world were thinking. Like, pointed out, Paul is even quoting Aristotle in Galatians and in Romans 2, for example. Like, there is influence there. So really weird.
So much to say when that comes up, but I just want to make the point. If you have water flowing out of your fountain, then 7 days, the god is apparently visiting you in the temple. And then now there's wine for 7 days. And if you get away from that god, which is in the temple.
That's the part he never brought up. He never
didn't emphasize it.
He doesn't emphasize that you mentioned that the people take the wine away, and when it's away from where the miracle, when they go away from the miracle, all of a sudden the wine turns back into water again.
That's not what it says. It did not say it turns back into water again. Okay, let's go back to the Pliny text here. Okay, the taste of which becomes like that of water. Again, you're trying to rationalize the text, the very thing you said we shouldn't do with John. Now you want to rationalize this. That's kind of a double standard there. It says it's still wine. It just has a taste of water. Now, again, I don't think Derrick or Neil think this actually happened, but they're trying to rationalize it. No, you're not coming on. End of story. And you'll see why when we get to the Josh Bowen section. So you can see right then and there that you have rationalized this. You've added to what the text says. That's my problem with what you're doing here. And again, this is all in the context of mythicists, not you two, but in the context of mythicists saying that this is somehow copying going on. That's what I'm disputing. You keep divorcing that context from taking my marks. So that's the problem there. I want to talk real quick about my analogy, and then we're going to move on to Inanna here. So let me jump out here. Let me make sure I get this video up, because you got to hit all the right steps in here. All right, there we go.
Nurses, the nymphs, bathed the infant Dionysus birth. This is a birth narrative.
And a baptism.
Birth and a baptism right here.
Right there, just the same as the Basilidians are doing.
They bathe him after his birth. Dionysus is bathed, for the water has the color and sparkle of wine, is clear and very pleasant to the taste.
Right.
Now, I don't know about you, bro. I drink water. We got water right here, okay? If all of a sudden we were saying the God is present, and I started going, oh my gosh, notice it's turning purple. It says color. It's sparkling like wine does, and it has a pleasant taste.
Mm-hmm.
And then you come along and go, the accents on that change, the accidents, but the substance is still water. I'm going to look at you and go, you idiot.
You're assuming that the ancients thought this
They
way,
weren't
or that
thinking
the
it.
gospel writers would have factored that in, and they're right. It does not matter.
absurd.
That is sophistry. What you're doing,
Yes.
It's a definition textbook sophistry. Trying to get out of this somehow. Trying to think of the best argument you could think
Any
of
wiggle?
to get myself out of this.
I was a prophet, was I not, Neil? I predicted he would do a magic
It's
trick.
a total magic trick. You got him, dude. Anybody with a normal IQ would notice that you're right here.
Okay, once again, the text does not say what they're saying. It does not say a transformation. That's important to keep in mind here. Now, I'm going to go back to the Aquiles Tatius text, because I do want to briefly talk about that. But first, let's talk about this for a second here. What did I actually say? My analogy is that if you have a faucet and water's coming out and you're washing dishes, and all of a sudden wine starts coming out, if what's in your hand, the wet cloth, is still water and not wine, that's not a miracle of water turning into wine. That'd be a miracle of replacement. Somehow the faucet has been replaced because the water that was coming out is still water, and it just new source. My point is that's all that seems to be happening in the Pliny text, and they have to add this transformation language to make it say what they want. Now, again, I'm not saying no one didn't interpret it that way. I'm saying that's not really definitive, and the idea that you could say this has to be the only way to read it is absurd, let alone that has any influence on Christianity there. So let me back up a little bit here. I want to go back to the text of Aquiles Tatius here, because I think this is an important, because they think I'm being inconsistent with this text, and I do want to cover this one. So let me put this up, because I said the 2nd century text, which I originally said 3rd century. 2nd century text. Are you really surprised? Are you really? If he didn't take me serious, he's not going to. He said he doesn't take me serious, Derrick. So he's not going to be in the chat if he doesn't take me serious, because he's not going to act serious. And he's insulted me way too many times. I have no problem blocking people who insult and demean like he has. And it's going to look even worse when we get to the Bowen conversation here. So let me go back a little bit here to this text of talking about the 2nd century one, which I do say that, yeah, this does seem to be Dionysus turning water into wine. So let's play this.
The original mother of all vines being a plant of their country.
Now he's reading from Aquiles Tatius here, just so you're aware.
There was a certain shepherd noted for his hospitality, just as the Athenians describe Icarus, from whom this Tyrian story derives its origin, so that it almost seems an Attic tale. They're Atticizing in the second sophistic. Dionysus once paid a visit to this herdsman, who set before him the produce of the earth and the result of the strength of his oxen, but their drink was the same as that of the oxen, since vines did not exist yet. Water is what the oxens drink, just like man. Man and oxen share the same drink. Dionysus thanked the herdsman for his kindly cheer and pledged him a friendly cup. But this drink was wine. The herdsman, drinking of it, danced for joy and said to the god, "Where did you get this purple water, my friend? Wherever did you find blood so sweet? For it is not that water which flows on the ground that, as it descends into the midriff, affords but a faint pleasure, while this delights the sense of smell before it ever reaches the mouth. When you touch it, it is cold, but it leaps down into the belly, and there, far down, lights up the fires of delight. This," said Dionysus, "is harvest water, the blood of the grape." Then the god led the herdsman to the vine and took hold of the clusters, squeezed them, and then pointing to the vine, "Here is your water," said he. "This is its source." That is the way in which wine came to men, as the Tyrian story goes, and they keep that day as Dionysus' festival. My father, wishing to celebrate it with splendor, had set out all that necessary for the dinner in a rich and costly fashion, but especially a precious cup to be used for libations to the god.
The point is, the fact that he doesn't criticize that this isn't exactly water turning into wine blows my mind, because you, in your video, pointed out, I think, 7 or 8.
There's a lot of them.
Primary, there's 8 total that I know of. I don't know if you pointed out all. You might have pointed
Probably
out
not all.
7 or something. 2 of them are contemporary, early 2nd century. 5 of them are definitely before the Gospels, for sure. So that's Theopompus, Aristotle, Diodorus, Plutarch, and Seneca.
Yeah.
Okay. Those 5 have either water from a fountain changing into wine and changing back into water,
we're gonna
or empty basins that are used.
Oh, we're going to get into this.
Yeah. So the fact that when you pointed those sources out, he said, "I know those sources. I read it from an apologist website." So he didn't read the sources.
You know, that's really weird that Neil says I didn't read the sources when I literally put Pliny on the screen to show you what the source says. Again, another lie.
Heard a secondary source tell him what to think, and it just ran with it.
No, I put the apologist website on the screen, Neil, to show you that apologists have discussed these things. It's not like we're hiding them or unaware of them. They have been discussed, because the argument is that we haven't. So again, taking things out of context now.
But the point is, the sources that you point out are more explicit on water turning into wine than the one that he admitted. He's the one that says that one is water into wine. It's because it's later, so he doesn't care.
Yeah.
No, the reason why I grant that one is pretty simple. It's because in the story, you have Dionysus show up to a herdsman, and the herdsman only has water to drink. Dionysus takes the cup. What was he walking around with a separate cup of wine? No, he takes the cup, hands it back to him, and it's wine now. And the herdsman still thinks it's water. And Dionysus corrects him and says, no, it's wine. So if I'm being charitable with that, we don't see, again, like a fountain shooting out water and then it becomes wine. We see there's just water there. And all of a sudden, the cup now has wine in it. I didn't think that would be controversial. I thought that was like, yeah, that's water into wine. That seems to be the simplest explanation. Do you not want me to do that? Like, you're mad at me for doing that? Like, okay. If you guys want to try to make the case that it's not water turning the wine, that's weird. It just seems that the herdsman sits there. He invites Dionysus to eat and drink. All he has is water, the same drink the oxen have. And Dionysus has the cup. Was it his own cup that he brought with him? Or so? That seems kind of weird. It seems simpler just to say he takes the cup the herdsman gave him and he transforms it into wine. Okay, so then, yeah, I do agree that's turning water into wine. So I don't understand the point that's being made here. Like, how am I being inconsistent? I'm agreeing that this one is water into wine. And like, I wouldn't be surprised if we did find pre-Christian texts in the future, Dionysus turning water into wine. He was a wine deity as well as other things. I mean, like, why wouldn't we find this? I think it's a little surprising. We really don't have that. We have just water taking on qualities of wine, water taking on qualities, or wine taking on qualities of wallet, fountains shooting out wine. I've always thought that was kind of weird, though. So that's what I say about that. All right, now, so I think we've beat this Dionysus stuff with a dead horse. There's a lot of issues here, and I think it's now time to move on to the Inanna stuff. Because now they go back to my original presentation where I'm pointing out Inanna was not dead for 3 days and 3 nights. And you're going to see some interesting things here. So let me put this back on the screen. There we go.
Oh, it isn't.
But where is it?
Oh, so it's not in there, but it's in there.
She says, this is Inanna speaking to her servant. Early in the text, she says, on this day I will descend to the underworld. When I've arrived, Ninkaburu, arrived in the underworld, that is, make a lament for me. Okay? Beat the drum for me in the sanctuary. Make the rounds of the houses of the gods. So when Inanna gets to the underworld, Ninkaburu is supposed to start lamenting for her.
Now, what I'm addressing here, ladies and gentlemen, is the claim that the descent of Inanna says she died for 3 days and 3 nights. Watch what they do. They're going to shift the argument to something else.
Then we read, in between these two texts, we read that Inanna descends and dies. So then we read, after 3 days and 3 nights had passed, her minister, Ninkaburu, she made a lament for her in the ruined house. She beat the drum. She made the rounds of the houses of the gods for her. What mythicists have done is they've misunderstood the text. It doesn't say she was dead for 3 days and 3 nights. It says that her descent to the underworld took 3 days and 3 nights. They've assumed the 3 days and 3 nights corresponded to her death, not her descent. So Inanna is not dead for 3 days and 3 nights. They misread the text.
Notice again what I said. I'm arguing the text does not say she was dead for 3 days and 3 nights.
It corresponds to her descending because it's an instruction for her servant.
That was he's either really not smart, has bad reading comprehension, or is very dishonest. And I think it's the latter. Because what he just did there, first he tries to say, you guys heard there's 3 days and 3 nights? It's not in there. Listen.
No. I said it doesn't say she's dead for 3 days and 3 nights. Take what I said in context. You're not being charitable.
In the text. That already right there is sort of a sleight of hand.
That's a
you're saying it's not in there, but it is in there.
Yeah, why is he saying that?
Well, that didn't make any sense.
Why do you think, psychoanalyze him just a second, why do you think he doesn't
sort of a way to shake up, like you heard this was in there? It's not really what you think.
My Christian audience, don't get worked up over this.
So then
right, don't get worked up on it, because it doesn't say she was dead for 3 days and 3 nights. That's the obvious point I'm making.
He continues, and when I first thought, I go, let me see how he's going to argue this. There's no way you can argue this not in the text. It's in the text. Stanley Noah Kramer is the standard translation.
Right, I literally showed where it was. Like, why would I never argued it wasn't? This is such a straw man.
There's other translations that also say the same thing. The standard reading of the text talks about the thing that he wrote on the screen is in there. It's early on in the text.
Yeah.
Then there's about 10 verses that he doesn't show on the screen. Right. And then it says, Inanna was like a corpse. Her corpse was hung on a hook. Immediately after that, the next thing that it says, there's no text in between. The very next text says, after 3 days and 3 nights. And then there's some stuff that happens. The plain reading, once again, we're going back to the plain reading of the text again. The plain reading of the text is that Inanna was dead, was a corpse on a hook, and then immediately it says after 3 days and 3 nights. Yep. And then there's a process of Anki taking the water of life and having it sprinkled on it. The point is the only indication of time passing in this entire myth is 3 days and 3 nights. Yep. There is no indication that it's any longer than that. What he did there was put text on the screen to make it seem like the text says this, and then it says this. But he leaves out what the original text says, and I think he did it on purpose.
So before we get to Bowen, let me reiterate the actual argument I was making in the presentation. I think that is important here. So the argument I'm making is what we actually see in the beginning, I think, is relevant. And this is what Sandis was making in the paper I cited here. So on the day I descend to the underworld, when I arrive in the underworld, make the lament for me. So when I arrive, make the lament. And then you get down here, get all the way down here. It says, after 3 days and nights passed, her minister, Ninkaburu, started to carry out those instructions. So the argument I was making is the 3 days and 3 nights motif is attached to the tasks of Ninkaburu. Inanna tells her, when I arrive, start making the rounds for me. When did she start making the rounds? After 3 days and 3 nights. When was she supposed to do that? When she arrived in the underworld. So that is the argument I was making in there, in the presentation. So now they think they got me here because they're going to bring up a conversation I had with Josh Bowen, but they're missing a very, very important point about that conversation that they didn't want to tell their audience. And if they didn't know the details about this conversation, it's even worse for them. So let me play a little bit of this and then I'll give you the facts.
Actually gets juicy because I reach out to Joshua Bowen.
Also, I want you guys to notice something that really bothered me here. On this section you're about to watch, notice how much pleasure they're taking in this. Oh, they got me. They're going to expose me. I want you to notice how much pleasure they're taking in this, what they're about to do.
Look, Jones said, I was afraid of showing my audience his original video being funny probably, but either way, I wasn't. So I was like, all right, you brought me into this. You're like, check this out. Look at what he's saying about Inanna. So I just so happen to know an Assyriologist who's a serious one, who knows how to research this stuff. Hey, Josh, check it out, man. I got this problem. Michael Jones, can you see this clip right here, what Michael Jones is saying? What are your thoughts about this? Because this isn't how it looks in Samuel Noel Kramer's interpretation, his translation. And then Joshua Bowen wrote me a letter, but not only wrote me a letter, he said, I already talked to Jones about this, so I don't know why he drew that conclusion.
So let me get this straight. And Jones was shopping around for a Assyriologist, trying to get the right answer that he liked. If he didn't get the answer he liked, he ignored it and went right to the apologist.
Well, he literally told Joshua Bowen that he was actually using the work George Landis, who wrote in 1967, and the
one that he agrees with.
He agrees with it, right? It's a 3 or 4 page article. I read it today. The 3 days and 3 nights motif in Jonah 2:1, which is definitely in Greek a katabasis. This is a chthonic underworld descent.
That's the point. The 3-day motif is from that.
Right. This article tries to go bend over backwards to hunt only biblical antecedents, biblical text to find. There's a lot of 3 days, and then there's 3 days after, and then this 3-day journey. There's a lot of that, but there's no descent into death type of 3 days and 3 nights anywhere in the Bible. And this guy admits it, but he tries to interpret Samuel Noah Craner. He disagrees with a person who could read Sumerian, and this guy does not. He might know Hebrew, but I can't.
It's like if I'm going to go to a medical doctor, and that's the medical doctor says you need this prescription for this particular case.
Yeah,
and then I go, okay,
but the
hey Joe Rogan, what should I do here?
Yeah.
That's what you're doing. You're doing the same thing.
That's a good point. So he goes and finds this scholar, right? And this scholar actually turns around and says, actually, this is his conclusion. He interprets that as 3 days and 3 nights descent, which is exactly what Jones tried to do in this. After asking a bona fide Assyriologist, why are you on stage, not even giving like full disclosure about who your source is in the
interpretation? Explain the nuance.
So you guys heard that, right? I talked to Josh Bowen. That's what they're saying. And then I went on stage. Derrick, did you bother to ask about when Josh and I talked? Did you? I gave that presentation in March 2024. I spoke to Josh on Twitter on April 26th of that same year. So over a month after I gave the presentation. You got the dates wrong. I talked to Josh after I gave the presentation, not before. But you didn't bother to check, did you? Or you're lying. See, here's the thing. You're either lying or it's even worse than that, because you either knew when I talked to Josh, because I'll show you the screenshots here in a little bit. I will show you the conversation I had with Josh so you guys can see the context. So I had the conversation in April. So I will show you that. So you're either lying or you thought you got me. And instead of actually coming to talk to me to get the other side of the story, you didn't do good research. You didn't do proper research. And then you decided, oh, we're going to defame him. We're going to expose him out. Immediately make a video. So you either lied or you didn't do good research and then wanted to use this to attack and hurt me and defame me. Which is it? Because if you would have asked me, because you have my number, you can text me. If you would have actually, you said last night on your stream, you don't want to hurt people. You don't want to be this guy that goes around hurting people. I don't believe you, because this is exactly what you did. You thought you got dirt on me, and instead of coming to, hey, let me get your side of the story, you then went to the internet and said, we got him. We've got information we can use to attack him. Game on. We just won. Because that's what you really wanted to do, isn't it? So you either lied or you did really bad research, jumped to conclusions because you wanted to try to hurt me, isn't it? Interesting. So that's why I'm defending myself here, because you made a whole bunch of attacks on me. I thought you were a friend. Obviously, no, you didn't even want to come to me. And the last thing I think I said to you is I'm happy to have a conversation, but you didn't want to do that. So I have to now defend myself from these blatant character attacks and assassinations here. Or no, character assassinations. Let me put the video back up because I want to play a little bit more, and then I'm going to get to the actual conversation Josh and I had. And I'll show you the dates.
Says, I heard from this Assyriologist that said this. I heard from this guy that say this.
I just disagree with them, and I'm going to go with this guy in 1967 who's not a Sumerian academic expert.
But the way he says it in the speech was as if these people are wrong and this is right, objectively, without any.
No, what I made the argument. I said, look, you can look at the 3-day and 3-night motif. It's connected to Ninkaburu. It's not connected to Inanna's death. I was arguing from the internal aspects of the text.
Nuances. He's being dishonest.
Right. And there are examples. So Josh says, yes, I remember this. I actually had a bit of interaction with Michael on this particular issue. I'll try to summarize what I told him about the Sumerian and how I think it affects one's interpretation of this passage. I'm going to read this if that's okay.
Read it.
It's beefy and it backs you up because I thought you saw my hesitation. Neil.
You were hesitant.
I was like, bro, I don't want to I don't know. We don't want to and you're like, no, Derrick, I'm telling you. And I'm like, I couldn't, it didn't make sense to me at first. Now you have been totally vindicated in my head. First, I can't remember if he
has he though.
He cited the article in his presentation that you sent me. I don't remember if he cited it either, but I don't recall him mentioning this guy. But either way, he goes on and describes William F. Albright in the early 50s at Johns Hopkins University, earned a PhD in Semitics. In the article, he deals briefly, a long paragraph on pages 448 to 449 with the descent of Inanna and the line in question. Relying on the then recent work of Kramer and Nasher, he offers his own interpretation as theirs did not seem more likely than his. He says, when one compares the text of Inanna's instruction to Ninshubar with the account of his execution of her commands, it seems clear that Ninshubar's delay is to allow sufficient time for Inanna to arrive within the netherworld. The 3 days and 3 nights are intended to cover the time of the travel to the chthonic depths. He offers
the katabasis. That's the entire point.
But he's trying to argue it took 3 days and 3 nights. And this is what Josh said.
But the point of it is there's a 3-day motif in the text.
Even
and that's all that matters.
Got it.
No, because what was I refuting? The claim that it says Inanna was dead for 3 days and 3 nights. Again, you're taking me out of context to score cheap points.
Your point is, even if we give it, and they're wrong, but even if you give it to them, someone reading this would have picked up this motif.
It's still a 3-day motif, just like
Josh.
Jonah.
You know what Josh says about this? He offers no real argument for this position, other than to say that separation in the narrative between this statement about the passage of time and the revival of Inanna argues against understanding Inanna to have been dead for 3 days. Okay, so here are my thoughts on all of this. First, the grammar and syntax. Line 173 of the Descent of Inanna is the line under contention here. And we could show this on the screen. It reads, which should be translated, and I can't read this, but it's like umtazalata, which should be translated after 3 days and 3 nights passed. The final ata is used to indicate that the sentence before, which without the ata would be translated simply 3 days and 3 nights passed, is now placed in a temporal dependent clause, and what follows takes place after it. As an example, if I said Johnny went to the store, but then added ata to it, right? Like this, Johnny went to the store, ata. That would be translated after Johnny went to the store. You would be asking, what happened after Johnny went to the store? That is how this construction works. So what we need to ask ourselves is what the narrative sequence is here.
That's called pluperfect in Greek. It's a verb form that indicates something that just happened in the past.
See,
and that's why you have to have an expert read this.
This is it. So he goes, what is the order of the events? There are several examples of this type of construction being used with both in general and with specific time frames given, 3 days and 3 nights.
Okay, so let me go to the actual conversation I had. I think that's going to be the best thing to do at this point. I don't like showing this kind of stuff, but I looked through it. There is nothing like personal information in there, and I think at this point it warrants it, so I can just clear my name here. So again, what was I defending in the presentation? Dead for 3 days and 3 nights. So I gave the presentation in March, and then in April, this happened. Now, he responds to Frank Turek. He says, you know, like, how are we defining dying, rising gods? Inanna dies in the netherworld and is brought back to life after being mourned for 3 days and 3 nights. Now, when I saw that, I did not do what Derrick and Neil did. I didn't go, oh, 2-hour video exposing Josh Bowen. Let me just go get them because I really need to show how bad they are so they look so we just look better by comparison. No, I went and actually messaged him when I saw this because I didn't want to publicly shame him. So I reached out to him. As you can see the dates, April 26, 2004. That's on the slides. I said, I wanted to reach out to you privately about this because I'm not an expert. But in your tweet reply to Frank Turek, you said that Inanna was mourned for 3 days and 3 nights. Are you sure this is accurate? When I read it in the story, it seems the 3 days and 3 nights corresponds to her descent into the underworld. I have an older paper from George Landis that says the same thing in his paper. And then I gave him that. He said, hi, Michael. Let me look back at the Sumerian. Give me a sec. I said, appreciate it. I think it is based on something Inanna says in the beginning. She tells her servant, when I've arrived in the netherworld, and then later we read after 3 days and nights, you know, she starts doing her things. So it appears that 3 days and 3 nights corresponds to her descending and arriving in the underworld, not following her death. So he comes back and he says, so I think the text depicts the activities happening in the interim, Inanna's descent, passing through the gates, sitting on the throne. So you can kind of see there. Hold on, I might just accidentally close my window there. Okay, so after the 3 days and 3 nights pass, the verb za occurs. So you can sort of see this. So he says, I want to make this point clear, what Josh says here. He says, I need to do more. I think I would need to do some reading and look at a bunch more uses in a temporal construction to determine something more precisely. But it seems to me that the text is saying that after Inanna died, Ninkaburu began her lament. So I said, interesting. I did not know about the variants. I'm still caught up on what is said in line 33, though. Okay, this is also the point Landis makes in his paper. It seems Inanna is saying to start making rounds for her among the gods when she arrives in the underworld. Then latter, we read that she started this after 3 days and 3 nights. The 3-day motif seems to correspond to her descent. Then I note also, there's another reading here, that one that I had originally rejected because I thought that it did correspond. I said, Brian Metzger has another approach. He thinks 3 days and 3 nights also occurs after Inanna dies. But he says the time of the reanimation is not disclosed, but doubtlessly the mythographer conceived it to be considerably later than the period of the 3 days and 3 nights. I read this in a footnote. Sorry about the translation work. I was just curious when I saw your comment. I was confused because I heard the scholars say the 3 day and 3 night motifs corresponds to descent. Yeah, I was just looking at the grammar and the syntax. It seems that after is the after that the last thing that happens. But I'd have to find a bunch of examples to solidify that. So notice he doesn't give me all the examples that he gave Derrick there. So that's important to keep in mind, is that I sort of initiated this. And then I said, so then the conversation continues. He's going to look at some more. I said, okay, I'm talking about Frank. Yeah, Frank's obviously wrong. I was just curious if I had misread something because Jesus mythicists bring this up all the time to say she was dead for 3 days and 3 nights, just like Jesus. From my reading, it doesn't seem the text is saying that or that she was mourned for specifically 3 days. That's all I was trying to figure out. Gotcha. So that's the end of the conversation there. So I have to keep checking on my mic here. I'm worried it's getting busted again, but it seems like it's doing good. So let me make sure the mic is working well. But yeah, so you kind of see that's the actual conversation that we actually had there. You can see this happens after my presentation, and I did the very thing they said I wasn't doing, which is reaching out to professional Syriologists to try to figure out what is going on here. You kind of notice the problem with the way Derrick has used this and presented this. Now, I want to bring up this comment here because this guy says, bro, it's not that deep. Derrick made a slight mistake. Exactly. Oh, okay. Here's the problem. And this is why I'm not having a conversation with Derrick right now. You see the double standard? You see the double standard? It's not when he does something like this, it's just an innocent old mistake. Everyone does it. But what they said about me, and they thought the mistakes I made. I'm dishonest. I'm a sophist. I'm lying. I'm intentionally deceiving. Notice the double standard here. The problem. Do you guys get what I'm getting at here? Notice that when they make the mistake, it's just an honest mistake. People do this. But they're allowed to go off on these big, long tangents about how evil and messed up I am and how I'm deceiving you all. And I'm fishing around for answers and not giving you the full story. You see the double standard? Okay. Again, this is the problem. This is the problem here. I don't want to talk to Derrick right now because he didn't want to talk to me this past month when he was preparing to post this video. He wanted to make the video. He didn't want to come and make sure he got the full context to verify that he actually had the right information. No, he wanted to run to his audience, make a video exposing me to try to attack me. Okay. Why couldn't what I did just may have been an honest mistake? Why didn't he reach out to try to figure out if it was just an honest mistake? Why did he immediately think it was time to make a video and assume malicious intent on my part? Okay. Why is it that when he does, it's an honest mistake, but when I do it, it's pure deceit? That's the problem I see here. If he wanted to talk about this like men, we should have done this weeks ago. He didn't want to do that. So now I don't want to talk to him. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to do what he did to me, unfortunately. Okay. I don't see why that had to happen this way. So that's the problem. He took things out of context, or he did really bad research, thought he got something on me, immediately was like, "Ooh, we can hurt him with this. Let's do it." That's the problem. So either you lied or you did bad research with malicious intent. I don't know what to tell you. That's the problem here. And that's what's going on. That's what really, really bothers me. Okay. Could it have been an honest mistake? Yes. But then the malicious intent followed up with the honest mistake. That's the problem. Because that's what he did. So that's the problem here. Is it muted again? Hope not. No. People are saying muted because I think they're trying to distract me, but no, I don't think it's muted. So yeah. All right. So let's move on. But see, that's the biggest problem I have here. And that's why I don't really feel like talking to Derrick right now, because it's very clear that he wanted to use this against me instead of actually doing the proper research to make sure that, you know, he was getting his facts right. The malicious intent. Yeah, that's not what friends do. So I'm going to move on ahead to another section here, and we will keep going because there's some other things I want to get to. Now, I'm not going to get to the Dennis McDonald stuff, and there's a reason why. We'll get to that later.
After Inchigarana heard this matter.
It changes the plain, once again, the plain reading of the text
Bingo.
disproves what Michael Jones is saying, and he's being dishonest by showing text on the screen that's not in the correct order.
Why wouldn't you have just
or maybe it's in the correct order, but you're skipping 10 verses and you're leaving out the part where Inanna's dead as a corpse on a hook, which follows immediately with the ata.
Yep.
After 3 days and 3 nights.
Exactly.
And then it's fine. You want to argue that there's more time after that in between her and getting revived? You can, but there's no indication in the text that it happens.
No.
If you're looking at the text for the plain reading,
yep.
All it seems that after she's dead, she's hung on a hook after 3 days and 3 nights, and then all this stuff happens seemingly in one day.
Meaning she's
because
dead for 3 days and 3 nights.
Right. There's no indication that between the time that it says 3 days and 3 nights and the time that Enki revives her, there's no indication anywhere of any time passing besides the day that they're in.
Okay. As I said, when I was talking with Josh, I cited an author. I will put that up now. So let me go back to this. Okay, this is, again, the footnote I was talking about when I was talking with Josh. Okay, what does he say when you look at this? He says, okay, that Ninkabiru, perceiving that her mistress Inanna had not returned from the netherworld, proceeds to make rounds to the gods, lamenting before them in accord with the formula of Inanna had previously given them. The time of the reanimation is not disclosed, but doubtlessly the mythographer conceived it to be considerably later than the period of 3 days and 3 nights. So there's no time indicators, but the events that happened seem to suggest a much longer time. So there's not mourning for 3 days. She's not dead for 3 days. That's just the period after when she starts her rounds. That's the problem here. So no, we're reading too much into the text. We're trying to rationalize it. And I thought that's not what we were supposed to do. I thought we were just supposed to let the text say what it says. So lame. Well, we're going to get to more because we're going to get to Mark Smith here in a minute. But yeah, it's just funny to me, guys, that when I thought I had something on Josh, because it doesn't say she was mourned for 3 days and 3 nights. What did I do? I went to him and I said, hey, I'm not sure if this is right. Can you clarify? And then he gives me some more information. And I go, okay, I'll wait to see your final decision, which he never gets back to me. When they think they got something on me, they don't come to me to say, hey, can you clear this up for us? No. Oh, let's make a video, guys. We can expose them. We can defame them. That's what we're really trying to do here. So you see the difference in the way they're acting versus how I handle that situation. Do you think it's fair? Do you think the way they handled this is really them exposing me, or is exposing how malicious they are and that they have an axe to grind and they really want to try to make Christians look bad? Derrick can say on his streams, I don't want to be the guy going around hurting people. But that's what you did, or that's what you attempted to do. That's the problem there. So let's move on ahead. I want to jump to Mark Smith because Mark Smith is going to start talking about Baal. Baal, I think, is a interesting account. He has a lot to say. Mark Smith has a lot to say on Baal. I argued in my presentation that Baal is not a dying and rising God, that we don't have enough sufficient evidence to establish that he is. So, I brought up Mark Smith, but let's see this.
Because he says Baal didn't die. Mark Smith's translation says,
Let me back up a little bit here so you can kind of see what I'm doing.
In the story, the gods are lamenting because they think Baal is dead. They think he is dead. And then all of a sudden Baal shows up and they're like, oh, you're alive. The end. Doesn't say he resurrected, though. Mark Smith is clear. He does not say he resurrected.
Wow.
It's very odd about Mark's, because he says Baal didn't die. Mark Smith's translation says literally, Mark Smith and Jeremiah Coogan, Baal is dead is the translation. There's another translation where it says the exact same thing. I have an article here from an academic article from Oxford Academic by Mark Smith himself. The final 2 tablets of the Baal cycle, Cat 1.5 through 1.6, certainly seem to provide evidence for Baal as a dying and rising god. Now he does talk about how there's the gap in the text.
Yep.
So we can only speculate on what the text says. The nature of the resurrection we don't know about.
Right.
The point is this: in the text that we do have, Baal is dead.
Yes.
Then there's the text is destroyed, and then it says that Anat defeats the god Death, or Mot, and after the god Death is defeated, Baal rises, literally resurrects. It's just, again,
the same verb.
It's to stand.
To stand.
Baal stands again, it says.
Yes.
And so it's a mystery, Mark Smith says. It's kind of a mystery on how it happens. The consensus seems to be because the Death was defeated, Baal was able to resurrect. It sort of was like a defeat death and then life comes. Very simple, actually. That's the plan.
Okay, let's go to Mark Smith's book here. Because they put it on the screen and they're trying to say Mark Smith just says that it seems to suggest that, but no, that's not what he's saying. Okay, so here we go. This is in the chapter. I can go right to the quote here. You see the life and death of Baal is the chapter there. Let's go down a little bit here to page 107, because that's where the quote. This is the quote they put on the screen. Okay, it certainly seems to provide evidence for Baal as a dying and rising god. Do you guys think you should look with reading comprehension skills and see certainly does not seem to be saying that. Because if we keep reading, and again, I've read this book. Okay, he says he has a whole section on how there are problems with this category. Okay, so he's not just saying it's a mystery. He actually makes a case against it. You go down and see what he says. What did I say on stage? I said, the text does not say, Mark Smith says that the text does not say Baal resurrected. And that's what we see in his work here. So see if I can zoom in and get that a little bit bigger there for you. So I think that'll look a little bit better. Yeah, that's better. Okay. The extent Baal cycle never recounts Baal's return to life. Therefore, any attempt to render a reconstruction of Baal's death and return to life should make no assumption about the nature of the latter. The absence of the god's death or his revivification from any of the 70 or so ritual texts is significant. So I was right what I said on stage. Mark Smith does say Baal is not resurrected. Okay. Talks about J.Z. Smith. He says there are comparisons with disappearing gods from Hittite mythology, like Telepenus. I think where did I heard like Telepinu or Telepenus is how I've heard it said. So let me go down to his conclusion here because he goes on for this a while and he makes a case that these are supposed to be comparable to the Ugaritic king dying and then being replaced by the new king. That's what the Baal cycle is meant to say, but not so much that Baal is even dying. He's a disappearing god. In the case of Baal, the ritual standing between nature and myth was not a complex procedure celebrating the death and resurrection of the god, but royal funerary ritual. So I was right what I said about Mark Smith. And if you look at him in context, his earlier sayings that Neil quoted, he's trying to steelman the position before he goes on and responds and gives his take. So again, I'm trying to tell you what Mark Smith actually said here. And if you go and look at it, okay, let me go back up here and go back to the earlier quotes that I had. Here, let me just do it this way. Okay. The extent Baal cycle never recounts, this is Mark Smith's own words, the extent Baal cycle never recounts Baal's return to life. Therefore, any attempt to render the reconstruction of Baal's death and return to life should make no assumption about the nature of the death. The absence of the god's death or his revivification from any of the 70 or so ritual texts is significant. So that's what he's saying there. Now, what does Mark Smith say? He says the gods later say Baal is dead, but I believe elsewhere he makes the case that they might just be mistaken, like that they're not getting the facts right. So it doesn't actually recount that, and that's the point I was making on stage. It's amazing how they just take me out of context, take what I say in the least charitable interpretation to try to make me say all sorts of things. Now, we've been going on for quite some time. There's more stuff I could say. I don't think they're getting my point about the Egyptian texts. Again, there's a lot of problems there because, again, Egyptian understandings of resurrection are different. You read Trygve Meninger, for example, he notes Plutarch and other writers are being influenced by Greek mythology like Homer and others. So they may not be getting the whole Egyptian mythology thing right. I don't have time to really go into that. I do want to move on to some latter stuff, though. A lot of stuff at the end before we get to some super chats here. So let me get back up to the video. I'm going to go way ahead because, again, a lot of the mimesis stuff I'm not going to really address because we have stuff planned in January for that. It's what I call we have what I would say is going to be a pincer move. If you try to debunk the first video we're going to upload, you're going to use the tactics of the second video. And if you try to debunk the second video, you're going to use the tactics of the first video. So I want to just move up here a little bit here. Okay, I think that's where I wanted to go. So let's talk a little bit about this.
Cite Psalms, they have no idea.
Yeah.
That's in the 6th century. That's when Christianity is thriving.
They know it's
and even in the 6th century, they're still fans of Homer. They're still going to watch the plays. They're still going to watch the chariot races.
Right.
They love their ancient pagan roots. But we're talking about in the late first, early 2nd century. You think they know Isaiah and Philippi? You think they know about Jonah in Pergamum? No.
Absolutely not.
That just solves that for you.
Mic drop.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I've had scholars come on who are Pauline academics, and I can put them on the screen here for you, that have actually pointed out that even Paul's audience, which they get into Paul's letters, Paul's audience doesn't know scripture, and the way that Paul does things with his scriptural arguments and trying to make cases. Like anyone who was reading that material would have caught him and go, dude, that's not what it says. However, I want to give examples, some clear, explicit ones that we're not talking about illusions or mimesis where they're not going to buy it without the clear, hi, I'm advertising. But these are important ones that anyone would have known, and you can actually check these yourself. We can get out of the rabbit trail of New Testament Greek text, Paul's syncretism, right? We talked about, for in him we live, we move, and have our being, which is Epimenides of Crete.
So they're talking about times the New Testament refers to pagan texts. Did I ever deny that? If you watch my video, Christian Virtue Ethics, I literally cite Aristotle is being quoted by Paul. I've never denied this. What I'm arguing against in the presentation, again, is copying. The idea that they're sort of copying this stuff. That's what I have a problem with. Because, again, no one's going to deny there's influence. I would never make such a claim. I've cited examples. One of my first disputes with Dan McClellan on TikTok was I'm saying, like, yeah, this psalm was clearly taken from a Phoenician text. Yeah, Isaiah is clearly aware of the Baal cycle. Like, I cited Aratus in that exchange way back in my first exchange with him. Like, I'd never deny this stuff. That's a really weird thing to bring up, as if I would ever dispute that. Another thing I want to bring up here is this.
Exactly.
And it's just not Gary Habermas or the guys that he likes.
Nope.
That Robert Price goes through the Gospels and shows how they're drawing from various Old Testament texts. But contra Price, that doesn't mean that they just went through the Old Testament and said, all right, let's take this one, and let's take this one, and let's take this one. It's far more likely they had a life and a story of Jesus in front of them. And they said, you know what that reminds me of? Exodus 18.
Right.
Oh, you know, that reminds me of Jonah 1. Because there's no pattern here other than the life of Jesus. They're just drawing incredibly randomly from the Old Testament.
I don't know if I agree with this. And
plus in order to be a Messiah, you have to fulfill the Old Testament. Right. So they're gonna be drawing from the Old Testament more than was actually there.
Yes,
yeah, so that's well easily established.
This is kind of his subjective opinion, right? Where he's like, okay, I think they had the life of Jesus, and then they saw things, and then they connected dots to the Old Testament to say he fulfilled these things, which he probably literally believes he really fulfilled those things. Whereas you and me would probably reverse that role and suggest they might, not saying a real...
They might have had sayings of Jesus in the gospel time. This is decades later. This is a long time has passed.
And so if you're going to craft your Messiah, you're going to craft your hero, why wouldn't you use models of that? And when I read about these things in the Gospels, it sounds more like a story being written rather than here's the mundane biography of a literal dude. This isn't...
Okay, you guys don't understand the argument I was making there against Price. Okay, I'm not saying they're not going to cite the Old Testament. Price was arguing that Jesus is just sort of like being put together by Old Testament passages. My response is, okay, well, if they're doing that, what order are they following? Because the gospel authors would be jumping from like First Kings to Samuel to Exodus to other texts like here. There's no order. The argument I'm making is it's too random. And you're not even addressing that. You're addressing something else that I didn't argue. My argument is that it's too random, the Old Testament text, for it to have any sort of pattern you can follow. It makes more sense that there was actual life of Jesus, and then they found random passages in the Old Testament to draw from. So that's the actual argument I was making there. And I think you guys just sort of missed that. I was not saying, yeah, of course he's got to fulfill the Old Testament. No, I was saying the Old Testament quotations are too random to have any sort of meaning. A couple other things I want to address before I get to super chats. Let's go here.
Do not.
We get that.
I think we need to go to you.
So what is this theory about Yahweh having a wife that was Asherah? So yes, at one point the Israelites decided God needed a wife. And the prophet said, you were wrong. That is stupid. So yeah, this definitely happens in ancient Judea. It's in the biblical text where we have direct evidence for them doing that and being condemned. So just like you have with Christians preaching Jesus as God, you had other groups come out later called the Gnostics that preached a weird combination of Greek mythology, some of their own ideas blending with Christianity. And they were condemned as heretics. Likewise, according to the biblical narrative, the ancient narrative is that God reveals himself, the Israelites rebel and syncretize him with other gods, reduce his glory, thinking he needs a wife, and the prophets are sent to condemn that. So, yes, we can acknowledge the ancient Israelites thought God needed a wife and say, duh, that's what the Bible says they were doing, and it was wrong. It was condemned by the prophets.
All right. So first of all, addressing the Asherah thing, he's got the chronology way off. So he has an axiom. The Bible has to be true no matter what. and any history has to come secondary. So instead of looking at Ugaritic sources where Asherah and Baal are already there,
Right.
they didn't introduce Asherah after the Ugaritic text.
No.
So Yahweh gets merged into the El cult in Jerusalem. They already had Asherah there. The archaeology proves this. Ask Jonathan Adler. Ask Gad Barnett. Ask Israel Think.
Okay, so the archaeology doesn't prove that. You're talking about texts from the Jerusalem cult, not Ugarit. You're jumping things here. You're saying at Ugarit, El and Astarte are there. Therefore, that was the Jerusalem belief? No, that's a logical leap. You have to look at Israelite texts to see what they believed. Okay, early texts we have of like Israelites don't ever do this. Like, again, go to like Numbers, 23:8, where it already it's an early text and it equates El and Yahweh as if they are the same deity there. There's that text, for example. But the argument is like, I got the chronology wrong. No. You're misunderstanding the point I'm making. The point I'm making is that Israel comes on the scene and they have a different theology. They didn't have the same beliefs as the Ugarites did, as the Ugaritic people did. They had a completely different theology. So you're assuming, though, you presuppose archaeology shows that the biblical authors, or the people who followed the early biblical texts, had this early theology, and then it was later updated, like under Josiah or something. That's an assumption. That's a scholarly reconstruction that is not proven by archaeology. You've made logical leaps there. The point I'm making is, look, when we look at the biblical texts, the earliest up to the more recent ones, none of them ever say, yes, Yahweh had a wife. Their theology was distinct and different when they come on the scene. You just can't say, well, the Ugaritic people had this theology, therefore that was the earliest theology of the Israelites. That's a logical leap, not justified. So you jumped ahead. You made way too much, and you're thinking it proves that? That's not how this works. Let me move here ahead up a little bit more. So let me put this video back up here.
Wake up, sheeple.
The part where he just said that you're not treating him like an equal, that you're looking down on him. This is the exact reason why I do this to him, because you don't even have basic historiography right. Moses couldn't have wrote the Torah because Hebrew didn't even exist in that time. So you're
okay. Who has argued, other than fundamentalists, that Moses had to write Hebrew in the 1200s? What? Like, read David Carr, Formation of the Hebrew Bible. He notes works like the Song of Solomon was a really early text, and then it was updated over time, including updates to the language. Kenneth Kitchen, in On the Reliability of the Old Testament, argues this as well. No one says Moses had to write Hebrew. Didn't you argue earlier when you're talking about the Zenavesta that these texts were like updated over time? Like, that's not how you would date something based on the language. We would expect these texts to be updated over time. Let's go on to another straw man here.
still not because I said so.
Yeah.
It's just nonsense.
So the question is did it evolve? Did polytheism evolve slowly into monotheism by reducing gods? That's just not how.
Okay, notice what I said. Okay, and then I said, is the argument that, or the question is did monotheism evolve slowly out of polytheism? Notice what they're going to say after this. I think it's basically Neil.
How religions work. I mean, you look at like the Arabia. It didn't go from polytheism to a few gods and then eventually Islam. It was polytheism and then Islam, revolutionary like movement that took over. Same with a lot of like Hinduism. It's been polytheistic for generations. No evidence of evolving slowly into monotheism. That's just not how religions work. There's revolutionary changes that happen overnight, not slow progression, evolution type thing. So when some biblical scholars say, well, yeah, the biblical religion slowly evolved out of polytheism, it doesn't fit any model I can really think of.
All right. So he's absolutely wrong. Number one, he was wrong about Arabian religion because the centuries leading up to Islam, Christianity and Judaism were on the rise there. Even their pagan religions had some sort of monistic bent where all the 365 gods are sort of under one. And so that's actually just completely wrong. It wasn't overnight they went from complete polytheism, like barbaric polytheists, into Islam overnight. No, as I mentioned, Christianity, Islam, Manichaeanism was spreading throughout that part of the world. The mandate.
All right, that's right, folks. I'm wrong that polytheism didn't slowly evolve into monotheism because Christians came in and converted people. You're proving my point, Neil. I'm agreeing with you. Like, did you not even try to take that charitable? Like, the question is do we see the slow evolution of many gods and eventually one God? No, we see these changes happen and then conversion starts to spread. That's what we see. Like, you're agreeing with me, like, and yet you're trying to debunk me by stating stuff that I never disputed. Like, again, are you even trying to present this in a charitable light, or do you just want to try to get me on everything? This is the problem with this type of stuff. If you got an axe to grind, these are the kind of things you're going to say. Why is this the case?
Well, any final words from you?
Well, I mean, I think we just demonstrated fully that Michael Jones is as he points out, that we don't treat him on the same level as I do. I know you try to be, but I kind of neglected, I kind of abandoned even attempting to do that because he's not serious, in my opinion. He's not coming seriously. He's not trying to find the truth. He's trying to find whatever. He's shopping around for scholars that agree with him. He's disregarding scholars that don't agree with him. To me, that's the sign of a person who is not serious.
It's not even just that. Like, the evidence Joshua Bowen brings, there's no debate. It solidifies how the understanding.
It's dishonest.
You go with a 1967 paper instead of what the contemporary academics are showing you in the actual language. You don't even.
There you have it, folks. They're not going to treat us as equal because they can't do proper research by checking with me and checking dates on when conversations happen. Therefore, we're dishonest and we're beneath them. That we can't be taken serious by them. And I'm supposed to have a conversation with them. Derrick, you said this. Why didn't you approach me to ask me why I think the imitations of Euripides is in John? Why didn't you come to me instead of mocking me with, you said Manning, and structural and thematic similarities? Okay, let's get the order of events right. Okay. Order of events here. I gave a presentation debunking mythicists who were saying copying. Not addressing you, not even about you. You got triggered by that, and you made a 2-hour video from one line in that wasn't addressed to you, where you insulted me. You called my followers sheep. Okay, that's a public honor challenge. You didn't come to me. You didn't go, hey, what did you mean when you said this? Was this addressed to us? So you immediately went to public and put that. So then what are we going to do? You attacked us publicly. We're going to respond publicly. Okay. Did it again. You took this conversation I had with Josh Bowen out of context. You didn't pay attention to the stream. You said I didn't correct myself, even though I did, to push all these personal attacks. You did the exact same thing you did the first time. So that's why I'm here again. And all this time, you could have reached out to me. You didn't want to do that. So what do you want me to do? Like, you attack me and I have to come to you and go, hey, why did you say those things? No, you've made this public. You started this by making this public. When the Pharisees came to Jesus, that was a public honor challenge. He's going to respond appropriately in the game of the honor challenge. So that's why Eric Manning and I did a stream. You wanted to make this a public honor challenge. Fine, we'll do it. Then a month goes by, you do the same thing again, but even worse this time. So respond in kind, like Jesus did. You didn't come to me like Nicodemus did, where you come at night to ask questions and we have a conversation. You wanted a public honor challenge. So that's why we're at this point now. And of course, you got a lot of things wrong, especially with why you attacked me. So where are we at right now? I don't really care to talk about this at this point. I think you made it very clear that through your actions, and actions speak louder than words. I don't know where this puts us at this point. It seems like all year, the atheist community has really been trying to get me on something. Like they really got to expose me instead of actually just having conversations. When I thought, when Josh Bowen did make a mistake on Twitter, I went to him privately and I said, hey, I don't think this is right. Can we look more into this? He says, yeah, I got to do some more research and I'll figure it out. But I think this is this. Okay. And then, but what do you guys do? You don't come to me. So what is going on here? Can you explain what's going on here and why I should actually have a public conversation with you guys now? I don't know if I can trust you. Like, I don't know if I can really trust you as a person, because how do I not know when I have a private conversation with you, you're not going to be fishing for information you can use against me later? Because this is what you do. Why didn't you come to me after you saw the presentation and say, hey, I wanted to ask you about a couple things here? No, you set a public honor challenge out. So we responded in kind. You did it again. And so we responded in kind. Why are we doing it this way? Because you're setting the tone and you keep coming after me. Even though yesterday on your live stream, you contradicted your own actions and you said, I don't want to be this guy that keeps picking these fights and going around trying to hurt people. But that's exactly what you did. That's exactly why when you got that information from Josh Bowen, you immediately jumped to conclusions that were not based on the data that you had. And you said, let's expose them. Let's go after them. Because that's what's really important here. Not, hey, let's try to have a conversation. Let's sit down, figure these things out. Do you see the problem here and why I don't really care to talk to you right now about it? You wanted to do the public honor challenge? That's what we're doing now. This is what you wanted. So this is what you're getting. How long did the Israelites live in Egypt? Is the 430-year gap symbolic? I think so. I don't really care, though. I think it's one of those things I don't really focus too much on. I think a lot of the numbers in the Pentateuch are exaggerated, symbolic, being used for other purposes. They're not trying to give chronology is what they're doing in that culture. Greetings from Germany. Thank you, Levi. Gifted 5 inspiring philosophy memberships. Thank you for that. You and others like Wes Huff are truly doing God's work. Your work makes it a little easier dealing with the benighted world. God bless you. Thank you. Dedicated dated the first, early second century to late first century, second century. Can you use this against them? Regards to what? I need to think about that. Here's what I can help to keep you up and running. I have a question for these guys trying to celebrate, tying Christian celebrations to pagan ones. Why would it matter if Christians co-opted pagan feasts? That doesn't mean they're worshiping pagan gods. Well, exactly. And let me be very clear about this. If Jesus, when he turned water into wine, was doing cultic competition with Dionysus or trying to show that he is like the real Dionysus, I would be perfectly fine with that. I'm not convinced that's the case, but it's not a hill I'm going to die on. I just don't think we have evidence of copying or borrowing or someone saying, quick, we need to make a Jewish version. Let's just grab this, this, and this. I think that's the reach I'm disputing. I don't think that they actually had like these texts or they, did these legends influence the culture of the time? Absolutely. Like I have this book for a reason. Like I'm not trying to shy away from that stuff. What I'm disputing is the copying going on here. And that was what the point of that talk was. Great stream as usual. Who's your favorite Christian philosopher? Any secular philosophers you recommend? Thanks. Let's see here. So Graham Oppie, I think, is great. Thomas Nagel's great. Nicholas Everett, I enjoy. I mean, there's a lot. It depends, but those should be some good ones to check out. Yeah, I don't know about that mute thing. I appreciate all the super chats for that. Not sure why that happened. Like, again, that was the weirdest thing ever. It just started muting it, and then I would hit the unmute button, and it would say it was unmuted, but then it wouldn't be. On the positive side, you got a lot of super chats. Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. Did you hear about Rationality Rules trying to bait David Wood into responding by pretending to be a concerned ex-Muslim Christian? Rationality Rules and Mythvision seem like they're being genuinely deceptive nowadays. Listen, well, I mean, with what happened today, yeah. Oh, and this, yeah. I mean, that's what happened when he took that conversation with Bowen out of context. I mean, was it a lie or was it not a lie? Like, you tell me. Why did they think that that was the way to do that? And we will get to Rationality Rules response. Don't worry. Pretty evil stuff in there. I mean, like, pretty evil. Like, they're really just sinking to new lows. Do you remember when Derrick had a mental breakdown because Jadar asked him about epistemology? I wouldn't call it a mental breakdown. I think he was just frustrated. But if they want to call this a mental breakdown, I mean, I'm sure they will, because that they love to spin things to make us look bad. It's at the point now where the atheist community I've seen over the past year is not, this is what we believe and this is why we disagree. It's, we have to make the apologists look bad, so we just look better by comparison, and maybe the public will just trust us instead. Why don't you guys just focus on the facts? Now, one of the things Derrick and Neil did bring up in that stream is they said, we Christians have to show that this stuff is true. And I'm like, scratching my head going, dude, that's what we've been doing. Like we've been arguing for years for the reliability of the Gospels, that Jesus did rise from the dead, and there is evidence to support that. Like the idea we've not been doing that, that's exactly what we mainly focus on. Dionysius, again, these atheists can't get rid of their debunked talking points. IP, I'd love to chat with you. Bring me on so we can set our differences and discuss these issues. No. I'm not platforming you. You made it very clear you want to try to expose and attack me. Okay? There's no reason to give you a platform for that. If that's what you wanted from the beginning, that's what we should have done. But instead, you wanted to make that 2-hour video instead of coming to me, talk to me privately or publicly. Then you wanted to make the 3.5-hour video. You wanted to do the honor challenging, so we're doing the honor challenging. This is what you wanted, unfortunately. Do you think Mythvision is being purposely deceptful or just ignorant? Well, if you're going to listen to his followers, he just made an honest mistake, guys. It happens. But when I do something they think I did bad, I'm being deceptive, I'm lying, I'm a sophist, all this stuff. They're going to expose me. The double standard. I think he either knew about the conversation, the dates that actually occurred, and he wanted to use that. I think it's probably more likely he got this stuff from Bowen, jumped to conclusions, and said, now we can really expose them, because that's what our real goals are. I think that's more likely what happened. I'm not so sure about the thing where they said I didn't correct myself. That was weird, because Derrick's in the live chat of the last stream, and I said I corrected myself, and he's like, he never said he corrected himself. It's like, I've seen many comparisons of Jesus to those other gods. They leave me underwhelmed, like people subconsciously want a reason to dismiss Jesus. Yeah, I don't even care too much about them, especially if they're more I've listened to Nathan Nadeau on this. I like it's not a big deal, because we can still argue for historicity as we do. So yeah, that's an odd argument. Where are we at? Your Sky Daddy won't help you get out of this humiliation. You see, you've been humiliated. Is that no, that's AP. For a second, I thought it was Destiny in there. Amazing, skeptical, rational, cosmic, free-thinking atheist. Love it. Love it. They mentioned that the theophany kicks off on January 5th, which commemorating the wedding in Cana, and so does the Theodosia of Dionysius and Pliny. Thoughts? Coincidence? Common dates? It could be a coincidence. That happens. Now, again, the date is January 5th, and the date they assigned to the baptism is January 6th. So it's actually off by a day. Now, they're going to make the case, well, they were celebrating on the eve. Well, then they really should have started the eve on the 4th, because it'd be the eve of that, and then it'd be the 5th. So I'm not really convinced by that. Even if it was, I'd see it more as cultic competition, not a hill I'd die on. But again, it's far easier just to explain this with liturgical aspects. They were that if you start in Mark on, I believe, January 1st, you get to the baptism by then. So now again, even if that's not the case, I mean, again, I my original belief about this stuff was this was cultic competition. Like, that's not imitating, though. Sorry, I jumped ahead there. That's not imitating, though. That's cultic competition. This happens in the Old Testament. Richard Hess talks about this with the Jewish feast. If the Christians were doing something similar, okay, they're doing something similar. Just because there are parallels we see with Abe Lincoln to JFK, that doesn't mean JFK didn't exist or those parallels didn't happen or have connection. Exactly. We'll talk more about something like that in January. I say Derrick is a Shabir of mythicism. Derrick and Neil claim to have the view while putting a nice face and reinterpreting in their favor. Here's a super chat. Please fix your equipment. I'll try. I have never seen this before. Like, Of all the streams I've done, it's never done this where it just like starts muting. So I don't know what happened there. It was weird. I'm still trying to figure that out. Plain reading, the rallying cry of the intellectual lazy. What even is the funny thing called studying? Am I right? I'm a Mythvision fan, but I totally get where you're coming from, IP. Thank you. I enjoy the back and forth with you guys, but yeah, good intentions, bad execution. I appreciate that. Again, let me reiterate the problem I see here from my perspective. I'm not even sure if Derrick is still here at this point. Let me reiterate the problem I see. What is sort of going on here, okay? I get a presentation on mythicists. The mythicist, Derrick's not a mythicist. He's not. Okay? I did a presentation on mythicists. He got triggered by that, even though it wasn't addressing him. He didn't come to me. He made a public honor challenge by posting a video, attacking me, attacking my followers, all this kind of stuff. So we responded in kind, just like Jesus would. Then he comes back and has an even bigger honor challenge, which is just based on horrible understandings of what took place. And so that's what I'm doing now. At any point in this, if he wanted to talk to me privately, he could have. He didn't want to do that. We talked a little bit here and there. He said he was going to upload a video, and I thought it was going to be much nicer than the way he made it sound to be. But yeah. Bring Derrick on. Shore this up. No. I'm not platforming a guy who's trying to use anything he can to defame me and publicly attack me after he said he was a friend. I bet you should have Andrew Loke on to discuss his new book. Just came out the other day. It looks really good. I'll take a look at it. I've not seen it yet. I'm sorry if I've sounded like the guy, but we should pray for Mythvision and hope that Simi rethinks his actions. Yeah. And his viewpoints. And we should also pray for Mike Jones as well. Much appreciated. And yeah, I pray for them every day. They may not believe me, but I do. Thank you for becoming a channel member. Hold on, I got a cough. Now let me see if it mutes again. That'd be interesting if I hit mute and it mutes on its own. Let me know if it mutes again, because I just hit mute to cough. Wonder if that'll be the issue, because I have no idea what the issue was. Thank you for destroying Derrick and Mythvision. Listen, I don't want to. I'll be honest, I don't want to do this kind of stuff. But it's like, if someone came into your house and started attacking you, you would defend yourself. If someone starts attacking you, when Jesus' public reputation was challenged by the Pharisees, he defended himself. And that's what's happening here. So I have to defend myself because they called me into the public arena. That's unfortunate. This is what it came to, but this is what it came to. Thanks. Needed a palate cleanser. I had to listen to 3 presentations on how a certain holiday is pagan at my commie university on Wednesday. Yeah, I get it. I meant that. Did they live there for how long as Jacob and Joseph came into Egypt around the second intermediate period? Maybe. You could maybe do that, but I mean, I don't think that we're meant to do those as calculations. Do you think the mythic theories are association fallacies? A lot of them are based on that for sure. A lot of them sort of go there. As Christians who works on the road, what would you suggest for someone who misses church and work a lot? So you're lucky we live in a modern age where you can listen in to live stream churches. I'd say that. I'd say join a Bible study, join a church, go when you can, and then just try to listen online. That kind of stuff as well, I think, is important. I mean, because we all need community. What was that comment? I don't blame you. I'd be angry too. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Fisherman's Corner, for gifting 50 Inspiring Philosophy memberships. That is a lot. That will help the channel. Much appreciated. Any plans on doing videos tagging? I don't know. I have to think about that. I need to look more at their stuff. The comparisons mythicists use versus Christianity are superficial, very water from the waters, a la Billy Carson. Come back in January. We'll have some more stuff on that. We've got a interesting plan. So we already did this one. Has this been the same comment? Okay, so it came in more than once. Yeah, I'll take a look at it. Doing another 50 because Jamie CME is calling me unsaved. How dare he? You should do another 50. Now, I appreciate all the help. There's the other 50. Much appreciated. Opinions on icons or tattoos. I think they're fine. I don't think there's anything wrong with them. Yeah, I'd be perfectly fine with them. I think that's not a big deal. The New Testament is more based on Greek myth than the Old Testament. No, I don't think that at all. I think it's very clear that the majority of what they're citing is Old Testament texts. That's far more the context of what they're interested in here. I covered a second one of their videos, Esoterica. Okay. Cool. Yeah, I'll see if I have time. I'll take a look. Have you heard of Thomas J.J. Altzer? He's my favorite Christian philosopher. I also think Wittgenstein can be interpreted as profoundly Christian way. Well, I think Wittgenstein was a Christian. He just didn't really talk about it that much. On behalf of all Derricks, our bad dude, we apologize for this and George Floyd. IP, why do you think some of the atheist channels are going to personal attacks more? I don't know. That's a good question. There's been a lot of that lately. It's really just sad to see that this is what they've come to. This is the flailings of new atheism now, unfortunately. Yeah, a lot of issues there. Unfortunately, it just is what it is. And so when I have the time, I will defend myself. But for the most part, I'm going to focus on the videos I want to do and attacking arguments and presenting evidence for Christianity. The reliability of the gospel series will be done in January. And then I'll move on to some other videos as well. Is Isaiah 53 about Jesus? I heard no. Different opinions. I think it's typologically about Jesus is what I say. So that's where we're at, folks. Again, I don't have time to get to everything. We've been going for 2 hours. I'm not going to be here for 3.5 like they are. I'm sure Derrick will do a 4-hour live stream now. More of this. But I mean, like, it would have been better if he just left out the personal attacks. If he would have just been like, let me just show where we disagree and go there. They couldn't do that, though. They had to make it personal. And it blew up in their faces. Because I didn't talk to Bowen and then do the presentation. They got that reversed. They got a lot of issues wrong. So this is where we're at now. I don't know if I really can talk to them privately anymore, as I said. How do I know they're not going to use stuff against me? Like, where are we at now? So I'll be back on my channel Monday with Avery of God Logic. We're going to do a live Q&A. So if you have questions that we didn't get to, we'll get to them then. Why did Matthew copy Mark on his meeting with Jesus? See my video on Matthew and Eyewitness account. I explained it in there if you want more on that. And again, yeah, we've given a lot of evidence to argue for Christianity, but I didn't really want to go more than 2 hours today. I got other things and more important things to do today. So I got to figure out why my family isn't home yet. They should have been home an hour ago or so. So anyway, I'm going, and that's another thing I'm kind of worried about. I don't know where they're at. So I'm trying to figure that out. Anything else? Can't think of anything. Again, there's a lot in the stream I could have addressed. Don't really have the time right now or the energy. I'm gonna move on to some other things. And again, at the end of the day, when we get to the rationality rules response, there's very little we're going to tackle because we said we're only going to address things that have to do with the model of the Exodus. They want to take things out of context. They want to accuse us of straw man when that's what they're doing. All they want, we're going to focus on the model because I'm sick and tired of the back and forth nonsense. But this is what the atheist community wants to do now, apparently. So this is where we're at, ladies and gentlemen. So I'm going to close this out. I appreciate everyone coming. I will be back live Monday, and we might try to go live Tuesday as well. I got to figure that out, though. So I'll talk to you guys later. Thanks, everyone, for coming.